If you don't like it, find another house. Those words still echo in my head, a stab wound that never quite heals. Every time I remember it, I feel that same chill run down my spine, that same mix of disbelief and the deep pain that only comes from being betrayed by someone you've given everything to. You know that moment when you look at your own son, and you no longer recognize the child you once held in your arms. That's exactly how I felt that autumn Sunday when Michael walked through the door of my mansion in Lincoln Park with 2 enormous suitcases, followed by his wife Jessica and her mother Linda. 3 pairs of eyes stared at me with a mixture of disdain and expectation, like vultures circling their prey. I, Sarah Orellana, 67 years old, with an entire life dedicated to my business and my family, never imagined I'd be treated like an intruder in the very house I built with my own 2 hands. Everything I had achieved, the Orellana textile chain, my reputation in the artisanal textile market, my entire estate, it all seemed to have become a target on my back. That afternoon, as I watched the 3 of them settle into the best rooms in my house without even asking me, something inside me began to shift. It was as if a switch had been flipped, the one that separates naive kindness from calculated survival. As they climbed the stairs with their expensive suitcases, bought with my money, I might add, I sat on the living room sofa trying to process what was happening. "Mom, it's just temporary," Michael said without even looking me in the eye. "We had some financial problems, and we need to stay here until we get our lives back in order." Temporary. Such a flexible word in the mouths of opportunists. It could mean weeks, months, or as I would soon discover, until you die and we inherit everything. You might be wondering how a woman like me, a successful entrepreneur, let herself get tangled up in this situation. The answer is simple and painful. A mother's love. That feeling that sometimes blinds us, that makes us believe our children would never intentionally hurt us. I was always tough in business, known for my shrewdness in international negotiations. But when it came to Michael, my heart melted like butter in the sun. I remember that day perfectly. The Chicago sky had that characteristic autumn blue, and I had prepared a simple lunch. I never liked having staff in the house on Sundays. I always preferred my own space. The phone rang, and my son's voice sounded strangely anxious on the other end. "Mom, I need to talk to you. We're on our way over." The "we" immediately caught my attention. Since Michael had married Jessica 3 years ago, our family visits had become increasingly rare and always marked by a certain tension. Not even an hour passed before the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I found not only Michael and Jessica, but also Linda, my daughter-in-law's mother, all of them with luggage. And they weren't small bags. My heart sped up. An uncomfortable feeling washed over me. "Mom, we lost the apartment," Michael blurted out as soon as he crossed the threshold. "The bank foreclosed on the mortgage. We have nowhere to go." I stood in silence for a few seconds, processing the information. It wasn't the first time my son had faced financial trouble. At 38, Michael had already gone through at least 5 different jobs, always leaving due to incompatibility with the company's values, a phrase I learned to translate as, he didn't want to follow rules or a schedule. "What happened to the money I lent you 3 months ago?" I asked, trying not to sound accusatory, but genuinely curious. Jessica quickly jumped in, fixing her impeccably dyed blonde hair. "We had some unexpected expenses, you know how it is. The car needed repairs, and then there was that trip to the Hamptons that we just couldn't cancel." Linda, who had been observing the scene in silence, took 2 steps forward with the posture of someone used to solving problems. "Sarah, I know this must be an inconvenience, but it's just for a few weeks until we find another place. I promise you won't even notice we're here." 3 adults in a 67-year-old woman's house, and I wouldn't even notice them. The lie was so obvious it almost made me laugh, but something inside me, that unconditional mother's love, spoke louder. "All right," I replied, stepping aside. "You can stay in the guest room and Emily's old room." That was all it took for the 3 of them to start hauling their suitcases upstairs without so much as a proper thank you. Jessica stopped midway, glanced at the living room decor, rare Andean textiles I had personally selected on my travels, and said with a condescending tone, We'll modernize this decor, don't you worry." I took a deep breath and reminded myself it was only temporary, a few weeks at most. Little did I know it would be the beginning of a nightmare that would last 3 long months. Within the first week, I noticed the dynamic of my house had completely changed. My carefully built routine over the years, waking up early, sipping tea while reading the newspaper, going to the store, returning late in the afternoon for a relaxing bath, had been utterly destroyed. The kitchen, always impeccably clean, was now constantly filled with dirty dishes. The roar of the television at full volume invaded every room until late at night, and my collection of special occasion wines began to mysteriously dwindle. But the worst was yet to come. In the second week, I started noticing small objects disappearing. A pair of emerald earrings my late husband had given me, an antique watch that belonged to my father. Small items of sentimental value that when I asked about them, no one knew where they were. "You must have put them somewhere and forgot, Mom," Michael would say in that tone one uses with a child. "You've been very forgetful lately." That was the first time I heard that insinuation, but it wouldn't be the last. Slowly, subtly, they began to plant the idea that I was losing my memory, getting confused, a tactic I would only fully understand much later. One morning, coming downstairs for my coffee, I found Jessica rummaging through my purse. When I confronted her, she replied with surprising ease, "I was just looking for the credit card to do some grocery shopping. Michael said it would be fine." "My card?" I asked, incredulous. "Of course we're eating here, aren't we? The least we can do is help with the shopping." That would have made sense if the shopping was actually for the house. But that same afternoon, Jessica returned with bags from the Magnificent Mile. Designer clothes, expensive shoes, imported perfumes. And my credit card statement, which arrived at the end of the month, showed charges at restaurants and stores I had never set foot in. When I confronted Michael about the excessive spending, his reaction left me speechless. "Mom, you have so much money saved up. What's the point of saving at this stage of life? We need to enjoy it while you're still here, right?" "While I'm still here," I repeated, a chill running down my spine. "You know, while you're still healthy enough to enjoy it with us," he added quickly. But the slip-up had already been made. It was in that moment that I realized my son wasn't just going through a rough patch. He and Jessica, with Linda's complicity, had a well-defined plan to extract as much of my wealth as possible. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. 3 long months in which I became an Oscar-worthy actress, playing the part of the frail elderly woman grateful for her family's company. Even my best friend Susan, the only one who knew part of my plan, started to worry. "Sarah, you seem different," she commented during one of our weekly lunches at the Palm Court. "Are you sure you're okay?" "I've never been better, Susan," I replied with an enigmatic smile. "Sometimes you have to take 1 step back to take 2 steps forward." What no one knew, not even Susan, was just how calculated that step back was. Every move, every concession, every forced smile brought me closer to the moment I was waiting for. The day I would reclaim not just my house but my dignity. The day I would teach Michael, Jessica, and Linda a lesson they would never forget. And that day was approaching. The 40th anniversary party for Orellana Textiles would be the perfect stage for my grand finale. The invitations were already being sent out. The guest list included Chicago's entire business elite journalists, influencers. It was going to be a memorable event. Of that, I was sure. Where are you from watching this right now? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to know who is following this story that completely changed my life. If you're not subscribed to the Elderly Stories channel, subscribe now and come find out how I taught an unforgettable lesson to these 3 people who tried to humiliate me in my own home. It all started on that Sunday morning, one of those days when the Chicago sun finally decides to appear after days of rain. I was preparing a simple lunch when the phone rang and the life I knew changed forever. During the first few weeks, I tried to keep up appearances. Every morning I woke up early, as I always had, and prepared a large breakfast for everyone. Scrambled eggs, fresh-baked bread, fruit cut with care. I would smile while serving them coffee and asking about their plans for the day. I offered to help Michael find a new job. I even suggested some contacts who might be interested in hiring him. "Mom, "I've got it under control," he would invariably reply with that condescending tone he had developed since he was a teenager. "I'm in talks with several multinational corporations that are very interested in my profile." After 2 weeks, I understood that those talks were as real as their interest in finding a new home. There were no interviews, no follow-up calls, no resumes sent. What there was a growing parade of delivery boxes, empty wine bottles, and long afternoons of Netflix in my living room. One evening after dinner, as I was clearing the dishes they had left scattered all over the table, I heard Jessica whisper to Michael in the hallway, "How much longer do we have to pretend we're looking for an apartment? This house is perfect. It has everything we need." "Patience, my love," he replied. "Mom will eventually get used to having us here. We just need to move our pieces carefully." His words hit me like a slap in the face. Moving pieces. As if I were just a pawn on a chessboard, an obstacle to overcome in their strategy to take what didn't belong to them. I clutched the plates to my chest, fighting the urge to confront them right then and there. It wasn't the time. I needed to be smarter than them. I soon realized that none of the three were actually interested in leaving. Why would they be? They had a house food and an old woman who paid all the bills. My beautiful Lincoln Park mansion, with its 6 bedrooms garden, with a pool and a privileged view of the city skyline, had become their personal 5-star hotel with all services included. The changes started subtly. First, it was the small tweaks to the decor. One day, the Andean tapestry I had brought back from Cusco disappeared, replaced by an abstract painting Jessica had bought because it matched the furniture better. Then, it was the order of the books in my library reorganized according to criteria only they understood, leaving me unable to find my favorite reads. "We're just making the house look more modern, Mom," Michael explained when I mentioned these changes. "This decor is so outdated. It looks like an ethnographic museum." Every word was a small cut to my heart. Those outdated objects were mementos from my travels, unique pieces I had personally selected on my expeditions through the Andes, silent witnesses to a life dedicated to preserving and promoting the ancestral textile art of our region. It got drastically worse when they started taking over my physical space. It was a Thursday afternoon, exactly 18 days after their arrival. I was in the kitchen making herbal tea when Michael came in, followed by Jessica. I sensed something different in the air, a palpable tension. "Mom, we've been thinking," he began with that tone I knew so well, the same one he used as a teenager when he wanted a new car. "It makes more sense to reorganize the house. The master bedroom has that large walk-in closet you barely use." I remained silent, holding the teacup so tightly my knuckles turned white. My bedroom, my closet, my sacred space where I kept not just clothes but a lifetime of memories. "Jessica needs more space for her clothes," he continued, as if he were doing me a favor by explaining the obvious. "And that office at the end of the hall would be perfect for Linda. She needs her privacy." My office. The place where I still managed parts of the business, where I kept important documents, where I took refuge to read a good book. Now it was to become Linda's corner. "And where would I stay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. That's when he said the words, the ones that changed everything. "The guest room in the back is more than enough for you. It's small, but it has its own bathroom. If you don't like it, find another house." And the worst part wasn't the sentence itself, but Jessica's mocking little laugh right after. That smirk of superiority, as if to say, "We won." Linda, who was passing through the hallway at that exact moment, didn't bother to hide her own smile of satisfaction. In that instant, something inside me broke, and something new was born. It wasn't anger. It was much deeper. It was a cold, calculating determination I had only ever felt during the most crucial moments of my career. I smiled back, a smile that didn't reach my eyes, and said simply, "I'll think about it." I didn't have the courage to confront them then. How could I explain what that bedroom meant to me? I had slept there with David, my late husband, for 30 years. My 2 children were born there in the natural home birth I had insisted on. Every corner held a piece of my history. Every object had a meaning they would never understand. 2 days later, I gave up my master bedroom without a fight. I watched in silence as Jessica reorganized my closet, tossing out clothes she considered old-fashioned and filling the space with her designer outfits. I watched as Linda transformed my office into her personal space, filling it with those crystals and self-help books she was so fond of. I moved into the small guest room in the back, taking only the essentials with me. A few family photos, my medications, my most beloved books. The space was so small, I had to leave most of my belongings in boxes in the garage. Temporary, I repeated to myself every night before sleep. This is temporary. But as the days went by, it became clear their intentions were far from temporary. One morning, looking for the pearl necklace I inherited from my mother, I was horrified to find it missing from its case. When I asked about it, the three of them exchanged glances. "Are you sure you left it there?" Michael questioned. "You've been forgetting where you put things lately." "I put it in my jewelry box like I always do," I insisted. "Maybe you lent it to someone and forgot," Jessica suggested with false concern. "My grandmother started like that, forgetting little things until—" She didn't finish the sentence, but the message was clear. They were planting doubts about my mental capacity, and it wasn't the first time. In recent weeks, they had casually commented on my supposed confusion with dates, my difficulty remembering names, my tendency to repeat stories. That night, locked in my tiny room, I meticulously reviewed my memory. Was I really forgetting things? I took a notebook and began to write down every incident they had mentioned. Doctor's appointments I had supposedly forgotten, calls they claimed to have made that I didn't remember, conversations they swore we had. Analyzing it all calmly, a terrifying pattern emerged. There was no evidence of any of these memory lapses beyond their words. There were no reminders for those supposed appointments in my calendar. No record of those calls on my phone. It made no sense that I would forget important conversations while perfectly remembering details of business meetings from decades ago. I wasn't losing my memory. They were building a narrative. The confirmation came a week later when I caught Linda rummaging through my purse while I was supposedly taking a nap. "What are you doing?" I asked, startling her. "Oh, Sarah, you scared me," she replied, quickly composing herself. "I was just looking for an aspirin. I have a terrible headache." "The aspirin is in the bathroom medicine cabinet where it's always been," I pointed out. "Not in my purse." Of course, how silly of me." She apologized with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I get confused sometimes, too." That night I carefully checked my purse. My address book had been tampered with, some pages slightly bent. My planner had subtle marks on certain dates, and most alarmingly, a few checks were missing from my checkbook. The next day I discreetly called the bank. 3 checks had recently been cashed with my supposed signature for considerable amounts. The signature was a convincing imitation, but it definitely wasn't mine. "Would you like to file a fraud report, Mrs. Orellana?" the bank manager asked. I hesitated. A report would mean a direct confrontation, possibly involving the police. My gut told me it wasn't time yet. I needed more information, more evidence, a more solid plan. "Not right now," I replied. "Just block the checkbook and issue a new one. I'll pick it up in person." That same day, while looking for a document on the family computer, I discovered something that chilled my blood. In the search history, I found "Symptoms of Senile Dementia. How to Request a Judicial Conservatorship of a Relative. Senior Living Facilities in Chicago. How to Prove Mental Incapacity." The evidence was undeniable. This wasn't just about them temporarily taking advantage of my generosity. They had a much more sinister plan: to declare me incompetent, take legal control of my assets, and possibly place me in some facility where I would be completely at their mercy. My first impulse was to confront them, to scream, to demand they leave my house immediately. But decades of running a company had taught me that impulsive decisions are rarely the most effective. In the business world, whoever loses their cool loses the negotiation. And this was essentially a negotiation for my life and my dignity. Instead of exploding, I decided to observe. I became a consummate actress, playing the role of the confused grandmother they expected to see. When they insinuated I had forgotten something, I would nod with feigned embarrassment. When I lost items they had hidden, I apologized for my supposed absent-mindedness. I let them believe their plan was working perfectly. Meanwhile, I began to lay out my own plan. I needed allies, people I could trust completely, and I knew exactly who they would be. One afternoon, claiming I was visiting an old friend, I went to the Palm Court, a discreet place where I used to meet Susan, my best friend from college. Instead of our usual chat about books and memories this time, I told her the whole truth. Her face went from disbelief to outrage. "This is criminal, Sarah," she exclaimed. "You have to report them immediately." "It's not that simple," I explained. "Their family and a public report would destroy the reputation of Orellana Textiles. I don't want 40 years of hard work to be tainted by a scandal like that." "So what are you going to do? You can't just let them keep abusing you." "I have a plan," I replied with a calmness that surprised even myself. "But I need your help, and Emily and Olivia's." That same night from Susan's phone, I called my daughter Emily in Ecuador. Unlike her brother, she had always been responsible, hardworking, and grateful. The news left her stunned. "I'm taking the first flight to Chicago," she declared immediately. "No, not yet," I told her. "I need no one to know we're in contact. For now, help me from there." The next day, I visited the law firm of Reynolds and Associates, where Dr. Olivia Reynolds, my trusted lawyer for over 2 decades, received me with her usual efficiency. "Sarah, this is extremely serious," she commented after hearing my detailed account and examining the evidence I had gathered. "They're laying the groundwork for a conservatorship case claiming you're no longer fit to manage your own assets." "Do they have any chance of succeeding?" I asked, though deep down I feared the answer. "Unfortunately, yes," she said. "The courts tend to be cautious in these cases, and if they present enough proof of cognitive decline, they could get at least a temporary conservatorship while a more thorough evaluation is done. And during that temporary period, Michael, as your son, would likely be appointed your temporary legal guardian. He would have access to your account's properties, company shares, everything." A shiver ran down my spine. The situation was even more dangerous than I had imagined. This wasn't just about an unwanted move-in or some excessive spending on my card. They were literally trying to erase me as an autonomous person, to turn me into a prisoner in the life I had built for myself. "I need to stop them," I affirmed with renewed determination. "And I need to do it in a way that they can never try something like this again." "I have some ideas," Olivia replied with that glint in her eye that always appeared when she faced a particularly challenging case. "But we'll need to act with extreme discretion. Any leak could alert them and speed up their plans." In the following weeks, while at home, I continued to play the role of the confused grandmother. I was secretly working with Olivia, Susan, and Emily on a plan that would completely turn the tables. Every move was meticulously calculated, every document carefully prepared, every ally strategically positioned. To keep up appearances, I gave up more and more space in my house. I let them reorganize the living room, move furniture, even completely redecorate the kitchen. I smiled when I saw my credit cards being used for extravagant shopping sprees on the Magnificent Mile. I pretended not to notice when more personal items mysteriously disappeared. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, every piece of my plan was quietly falling into place. I watched, I noted, I recorded conversations. Every insult disguised as a joke, every comment about my supposed inability to manage my own affairs, every plan they made for when I was no longer around. All this while they called me Mom and Grandma with fake sweetness in front of visitors. 3 months passed like this. 3 long months in which I became an Oscar-worthy actress playing the part of the frail elderly woman grateful for her family's company. Even my best friend Susan started to worry. "Sarah, you seem different," she commented during one of our weekly lunches at the Palm Court. "Are you sure you're okay?" "I've never been better, Susan," I replied with an enigmatic smile. "Sometimes you have to take 1 step back to take 2 steps forward." What no one knew, not even Susan, was just how calculated that step back was. Every move, every concession, every forced smile brought me closer to the moment I was waiting for. The day I would reclaim not just my house, but my dignity. The day I would teach Michael, Jessica, and Linda a lesson they would never forget. And that day was approaching. The 40th anniversary party for Orellana Textiles at the prestigious Union League Club would be the perfect stage for my grand finale. The invitations were already being sent out. The guest list included Chicago's entire business elite, journalists, influencers. It was going to be a memorable event. Of that I was sure. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling of my room, still mine for the moment, and began to map out a plan. It wouldn't be quick or simple, but it would be perfect. I didn't build a textile empire by being naive or impulsive. Every business move was calculated, every decision weighed, and now I would apply that same strategy to my personal life. The darkness of my room seemed like a perfect canvas for my thoughts. The soft snores of Michael and Jessica seeping in from the hallway only strengthened my resolve. How could they sleep so soundly after conspiring against the person who gave them a roof over their heads? The answer was simple and heartbreaking. They didn't care. To them, I was just a means to an end, an obstacle to overcome, a resource to exploit. By dawn, as the first rays of sun filtered through the curtains, I had the basic structure of my counterattack clear. I would need allies' resources, absolute discretion, and above all, patience. Revenge, like a fine wine, needs time to reach its perfect point. The next morning, with dark circles I carefully concealed with makeup, I acted normally. I made breakfast. I smiled at Linda's condescending comments about how I should organize dinner. I ignored the way Jessica blatantly sorted through my mail. I played my part perfectly. "I'm going to the store," I announced after breakfast. "There are some things I need to review personally." "Are you sure you can handle that alone, Mom?" Michael asked with false concern. "You seem a bit scattered lately." "I am perfectly capable of managing my own company, son," I replied with a tight smile. "I've been doing it for 40 years. Of course, Linda chimed in. "We're just worried about you. At our age, it's normal to need a little help." "Our age," she said, as if she and I were in the same generation when she was barely 5 years older than me. Another little insult disguised as camaraderie. I left the house with the excuse of visiting the main Orellana textile store, but my real destination was different. I drove to the law offices of Reynolds & Associates, where Dr. Olivia Reynolds was waiting for me. I had called her discreetly from my office phone the day before. "Sarah, what a surprise to see you without an appointment," she said loudly as I walked in, following the script we had agreed on just in case Michael decided to check up on me. Once in her office with the door closed and the guarantee of absolute confidentiality, I could finally unload. I told her everything. The progressive invasion of my space, the comments about my supposed memory loss, the plans I had overheard to have me declared incompetent. "This is very serious, Sarah," Olivia said, taking meticulous notes. "They are laying the groundwork for a judicial conservatorship. If they succeed, Michael could take full control of your assets." "Exactly," I confirmed. "And I have no doubt that's their ultimate goal. The question is, how do we stop them?" Olivia thought for a few moments, drumming her fingers on the mahogany desk. "First, we need to secure your legal capacity. I propose a complete neuropsychological evaluation with top specialists. These reports will be our first line of defense if they try to claim incapacity." I nodded. It was exactly what I had been thinking. "Second, we must protect your assets. If they get a conservatorship, even a temporary one, they could cause irreparable damage to your estate." "I have some ideas about that," I commented. "What do you think about selling the company?" Olivia's surprise was genuine. "Sell Orellana Textiles. But Sarah, it's your life, your legacy." "A legacy that Michael would destroy in a matter of months," I countered bitterly. "I'd rather sell it to someone who will value what I've built, who will continue the mission of preserving and promoting artisanal textile art, who will respect the artisans I've worked with for decades." Olivia nodded slowly, understanding my logic. "And if the company is no longer in your name when they attempt the conservatorship?" "Exactly. They can't touch it. The money from the sale could be transferred to overseas accounts in the name of a trust or foundation, something they can't easily access." We spent the next 2 hours outlining a complete legal strategy. Olivia, ever brilliant, found solutions for every possible scenario. Leaving her office, I felt a strange mix of sadness and determination. The sadness of having to part with the company that had been my entire life. The determination not to let the 3 vultures that had infested my house profit from decades of my hard work. My next step was to call Emily. Unlike her brother, she was always responsible. Intelligent, my partner in international business. I called her from a payphone to prevent Michael from tracking the call. "Mom, what's wrong?" "You sound worried," she said immediately upon hearing my voice. "I need your help, sweetheart, but you must promise me absolute discretion. Not even Michael can know we've spoken." "You're scaring me, Mom." "I have reason to be scared, Emily." I told her everything, leaving no detail out. The silence on the other end of the line grew increasingly tense as my story unfolded. "I'm taking the first flight to Chicago," she finally declared, her voice trembling with indignation. "No, dear," I replied calmly. "Not yet. I need you to help me from Ecuador first." I explained the first part of my plan: to sell Orellana textiles discreetly without anyone in Chicago knowing until it was a done deal. "But Mom, are you sure the company is your life?" "My life is much more than a company, Emily. And I'd rather see it in the hands of someone who will value it than have it be torn apart by your brother's incompetence and greed. Do you have a buyer in mind?" "Actually, yes. Do you remember Martin Edwards from United Artisanal Textiles? He's always admired our business model, and we share the same philosophy on fair trade with indigenous communities." "He's an excellent choice," Emily agreed. "He has the resources and the vision to continue your legacy." "Exactly. I want you to contact him discreetly, explain the situation in general terms without getting into family details. Tell him I'm considering retirement and looking for a buyer who respects the essence of Orellana textiles." "I'll do it today," Emily promised. "And then I'll need your help transferring the funds from the sale to secure overseas accounts. Olivia is preparing the legal structure, but I'll need your signature on some documents. Count on me, Mom. And when everything is ready, I'll come to Chicago. I'm not leaving you alone with those vultures." I finished her sentence. "That's exactly what they are." After hanging up, I stood staring at the phone booth with a sense of unreality. How had it come to this? Selling my company, hiding to call my own daughter, secretly plotting against my own son. Life had a particularly cruel sense of humor. The following days were a delicate dance between maintaining appearances at home and secretly advancing my plan. Every morning, I played the role of the compliant mother and mother-in-law, while every afternoon, under the pretext of managing the store, I met with different specialists, neurologists, psychiatrists, geriatricians. They all confirmed what I already knew. I was in perfect mental condition with no signs of cognitive decline. "It's impressive, Mrs. Orellana," commented Dr. Valenzuela, a renowned neurologist from a top clinic. "Your cognitive abilities are above average for any age, not just for someone who is 67. "And could you certify that officially?" I asked. "Of course. I will prepare a detailed report that no court could question." That was the first of 5 medical reports I obtained in the following weeks. Olivia kept them carefully in her safe, building our defensive arsenal. Meanwhile, Emily was making progress with the negotiations with Martin Edwards. As we expected, he was thrilled at the possibility of acquiring Orellana textiles. His initial offer exceeded our expectations. "It's 40% more than what we calculated as the market value," Emily informed me in one of our encrypted conversations. We had set up a communication system through a messaging app that Michael didn't know about, using an old phone I kept hidden in my locker at the store. "Martin is not just buying the physical assets, but the brand's prestige, the exclusive client portfolio. The market knowledge," I explained. "It's a fair price. He also mentioned he wants to keep the entire current staff, especially the master artisans, and he wants you to stay on as an honorary consultant if you wish." I smiled with a certain sadness. Martin truly understood the value of what I had built. It wasn't just a textile company, it was a bridge between ancient Andean traditions and the modern world. A way to preserve endangered techniques to offer a decent livelihood to often marginalized communities. "Let's accept his offer," I decided, but with one additional condition. The sale must be kept in absolute secret until the company's anniversary. It will be publicly announced during the 40th anniversary celebration. Emily immediately understood the strategy. "The perfect stage for your grand reveal," she commented. "All the key players in one place, the press present respectable witnesses." "Exactly." And by then, all the money must be secured in accounts that Michael cannot touch. While the sale negotiations progressed discreetly, I faced another dilemma: what to do with my house. The Lincoln Park mansion represented decades of memories. It had been the setting for happy and sad moments, family celebrations, the growth of my children. But now every corner was tainted by betrayal. Every room reminded me of some cruel comment, some humiliation suffered at the hands of those who should have protected and respected me. The answer came unexpectedly. During a visit to the Palm Court, Susan had invited Alicia Mendive, director of the New Dawn Foundation, an organization that worked with vulnerable seniors. "Our biggest challenge is space," Alicia was explaining as we had tea. "We have a waiting list of almost 50 people, many living in precarious conditions or completely abandoned by their families." I looked at this energetic 68-year-old woman with her perfectly coiffed white hair and eyes shining with passion for her cause. Something inside me resonated deeply with her mission. "And what if you had a much larger space?" I asked suddenly. "Say a mansion in Lincoln Park with 10 bedrooms, a pool, a large garden." Alicia's eyes widened, not believing what she was hearing. "That would be transformative. We could serve 3 times as many seniors, offer therapeutic activities, maybe even create a community center for those who still have some autonomy." In that moment, I knew exactly what to do with the house. It wouldn't be sold. It wouldn't be left to Michael. It wouldn't remain in my possession. It would be donated entirely to those who truly needed a home. "Alicia," I said with determination, "I am going to donate my house to the New Dawn Foundation, with one condition. The official transfer must occur 48 hours after the public announcement, which will be made at the Orellana Textiles anniversary party." Susan almost spilled her tea in surprise. Alicia was momentarily speechless, a rarity for her. "Sarah, I don't know what to say. It's the most generous gesture." "It's not generosity," I interrupted her gently. "It's poetic justice. That house, which was the scene of so much contempt for the elderly, will become a refuge for them. Where there was cruelty, there will be compassion. Where there was disdain, there will be respect." With these 2 fundamental decisions made, the sale of the company and the donation of the house, I felt the weight I was carrying begin to lighten. There were still many details to resolve, but the skeleton of my plan was formed. But a plan, however brilliant, needs contingencies. What if Michael, Jessica, and Linda discovered my intentions ahead of time? What if they accelerated their conservatorship plan? "We need evidence," I told Olivia during our next meeting, "irrefutable evidence of their true intentions." "What do you suggest?" "I want to record their conversations when they think I'm not around. Capture their plans, their insults, their true opinions of me." Olivia frowned. "There are legal considerations about recording without consent, Sarah. I won't use them in court," I clarified, "only to expose the truth to those who matter. Our friends' business partners, the Chicago Society, that now welcomes them with open arms, not knowing their true nature." With the help of a discreet technician recommended by Olivia, I installed small recording devices in strategic points of the house, the living room where they used to gather when they thought I was asleep, the dining room where they openly discussed their plans during lunch, even in my old bedroom now occupied by Michael and Jessica. The recordings I obtained in the following weeks surpassed my worst fears. The cruelty of their comments, the coldness with which they planned my future, the shameless greed with which they discussed how they would spend their inheritance once I was out of the way. Each new captured conversation was a stab to the heart, but it also strengthened my resolve. The last component of my plan required a place for me after the big reveal. Obviously, I couldn't continue living in the house once I publicly confronted Michael, Jessica, and Linda. And although I had several investment properties, they were all registered in my name and would be easily traceable. It was William Preston, a widowed real estate entrepreneur I had met at a charity event months earlier, who provided the perfect solution. "The Valley View condominium has just been completed," he commented during a discreet lunch. "It has Parkview's 24-hour security, and best of all, no one would associate Sarah Orellana with such a contemporary place." "Why do you say that?" I asked, half amused, half offended. "Because your public image is so linked to the traditional, the classic. The Andean textiles, your Lincoln Park house, your office with antique furniture. No one would look for you in a glass and steel building with integrated home automation and a rooftop pool. I couldn't help but laugh. He was right, of course. My personal aesthetic had always favored the traditional, the artisanal things with a history. But maybe it was time for a change, to reinvent myself, not just materially, but personally. "I'd love to see it," I replied. The apartment was everything William had promised, and more spacious bright, with spectacular views of the park and the skyline in the distance. Modern without being cold, sophisticated without being pretentious. It was perfect for starting this new chapter of my life. I bought it that same day through a company created by Olivia specifically for this purpose. No one except a small circle of trust knew I was the true owner. Susan took on the task of decorating it discreetly. As a retired interior designer, she had impeccable taste and knew my preferences better than anyone. In a few weeks, she transformed the empty space into a cozy home with some of my most cherished personal items that had been discreetly removed from the mansion without anyone noticing. "Ready for your new life," she announced proudly when she showed me the final result. "New beginning, new memories." With all the elements in place, the sale of the company, the legal protection against the conservatorship, the donation of the house, the new apartment, all that was left was the grand finale. The moment of revelation, which would be during the 40th anniversary party of Orellana Textiles. The next morning I called my daughter Emily, who lived in Ecuador. Unlike her brother, she was always responsible, intelligent, my partner in international business. The conversation was brief, but she immediately understood the gravity of the situation. One afternoon, returning early from the store, I overheard a conversation that chilled my blood. I had a severe migraine, something unusual for me, but the stress of the past few weeks was taking its toll. I asked Maria Elisa, my personal assistant, to handle the closing and decided to go home to rest. I entered quietly through the back door, a habit I had developed since my house was invaded. I didn't want to face the condescending looks or the feignedly concerned questions about my health. I needed a few moments of peace before putting on the mask of the confused grandmother again. As I walked through the garden, I heard voices coming from the terrace. The slightly ajar living room window allowed me to catch fragments of a conversation. I stopped motionless, immediately recognizing the voices of Michael, Jessica, and Linda. "The lawyer says we need more proof," Linda was saying in a conspiratorial tone. "Concrete evidence that she is no longer competent to make decisions." I was paralyzed, my heart beating so hard I feared they could hear it. "What kind of proof?" Jessica asked, sounding genuinely curious. "Unpaid bills, questionable financial decisions, erratic behavior," Linda explained, "things that can be documented and presented to a judge." There was a moment of silence, and then I heard my son's voice, the same child I rocked in my arms, for whom I sang lullabies, to whom I dedicated my life. "Can we create that proof?" he suggested with a coldness that froze my soul. "Intercept mail, alter payment dates, that sort of thing." "I don't know, Michael." Jessica's voice sounded hesitant. "Isn't that illegal?" "We're just helping to prove something that's already happening," he replied with a twisted logic that made me nauseous. "My mother is really no longer in a position to manage this whole estate. We are protecting her from herself and securing your future in the process," Linda added with a complicit chuckle. "Think of all you can do when you have unrestricted access to her accounts. That beach house you always wanted, international trips without worrying about costs?" I leaned against the garden wall, feeling my legs weaken. It wasn't just the confirmation of what I already suspected. It was the blatant cruelty, the calculated coldness with which they planned to destroy my autonomy. "And what will we do with her once we get the conservatorship?" Jessica asked, now seeming more interested in the plan. It was the answer to this question that finally broke my heart. "There are excellent facilities," Michael said, as if commenting on the weather. "Discreet places with good medical infrastructure. She'll be fine there." "But what if she refuses to go?" Jessica insisted. "She won't have a choice," my son replied with a coldness I never imagined he could possess. "Legally, she won't be able to make those kinds of decisions. I'll decide for her as her legal guardian." At that moment, leaning against the garden wall, I felt my legs give way. The betrayal was complete, absolute. It wasn't just about taking financial advantage of me, but literally erasing me, nullifying my existence as an autonomous human being. I remembered my father, who suffered from Alzheimer's in his final years. I saw firsthand what it meant to gradually lose the ability to decide about one's own life. The difference is that he was genuinely sick. He genuinely needed care. I, on the other hand, was in full possession of my mental faculties. I managed a profitable company, maintained international business relationships, read voraciously, stayed up to date on politics and economics. And yet my own son was willing to declare me incompetent just to get his hands on my money. "And after we get the conservatorship, what then?" Linda asked, always thinking several steps ahead. "We sell everything," Michael replied with cruel simplicity. "The house, the company, the properties. I'll be appointed the legal administrator, and we can finally live as we deserve." "And her," Jessica insisted, with a hint of doubt in her voice that for a fleeting second gave me hope that some humanity remained in her. "There are very good senior living facilities out there," Linda said with false concern. "Or we can keep a small apartment for her with a nurse. The important thing is that the money will finally be in the right hands." The hope vanished as quickly as it had appeared. There was no compassion in their plans, only cold calculation. To them, I wasn't a person with dreams, desires, fears, and rights. I was just an obstacle between them and my money. I walked away silently, returning to the back door. I left the property without anyone seeing me and got back in my car. I drove aimlessly for almost an hour, trying to process the magnitude of what I had just discovered. Michael's betrayal hurt in a way I never imagined possible. My own son, to whom I gave everything, was willing not only to rob me, but to destroy my identity, my autonomy, my dignity. It was as if a knife was twisting in my heart every time I remembered his cold, calculating words. When I finally calmed down enough to think clearly, I stopped at a quiet park. I took out my phone and called the two people I trusted most in the world, my daughter Emily and my lawyer, Dr. Olivia. "Emily, I need you to come back to Chicago as soon as possible," I said as soon as she answered. "But don't tell anyone, especially not your brother." "Mom, what happened?" she asked, alarmed by my tone. "I'll tell you everything when you get here. Just trust me, please." Then I called Olivia and arranged an urgent meeting for that same afternoon. Her office was a discreet place where I could speak openly without fear of being interrupted or discovered. "Sarah, in all my years of practicing law, I have never heard anything so outrageous," Olivia said after listening to my detailed account. "They have no legal basis for this. You are perfectly lucid and capable." "But did you hear their plan?" I replied, still trembling with indignation. "They're creating evidence, Olivia. Little things that when added up can convince a careless judge." "Don't worry," she reassured me, holding my hands. "We're going to create a much more effective counterplan. First, we need to protect your assets." That same afternoon, we began to implement legal protection measures. The first thing was to document my current mental state. Olivia scheduled appointments with 3 different specialists, a neurologist, a psychiatrist, and a geriatrician. All 3 certified, after exhaustive evaluations, that I was in full possession of my mental faculties and perfectly capable of managing my assets. "These reports are conclusive, Doctor," Mendoza, a renowned neurologist, assured me. "There are no signs of cognitive decline. Your memory is intact and your executive skills are exceptional for any age." "Would they be enough to counter a conservatorship attempt?" I asked. "With these reports, any judge with a modicum of sense would immediately dismiss such a request," he confirmed. "But I understand your concern. The very idea of facing such a process is terrifying." I left the consultation with a mix of relief and sadness. Relief to know I had solid legal defenses. Sadness that I needed them in the first place. How had it come to this? How had the child I taught to walk, to read, to dream become a calculating stranger planning my destruction? The next step was more complicated. I had to gather evidence of their intentions. Following Olivia's advice, I discreetly installed recording devices in strategic points of the house. It wasn't something I felt comfortable with. I had always valued privacy, even within my own family. But the circumstances were exceptional. I needed tangible proof of their plans. The recordings I obtained in the following days surpassed my worst fears. The casual cruelty with which they spoke of me when they thought I wasn't listening. The detailed plans to create evidence of my supposed incapacity. The discussions about how they would spend my money once they had me under their control. Each new recording was like a dagger, but it also strengthened my resolve. "We have everything," Olivia assured me after listening to some of the most incriminating recordings. "With this, we can not only defend you from any conservatorship attempt, but potentially press charges for attempted fraud and breach of trust." "I don't want to take them to court," I replied, feeling a strange calm. "I don't want a public scandal that tarnishes the Orellana Textiles name. I just want them out of my life for them to never be able to hurt me again, and for them to receive a lesson they will never forget." "I understand," Olivia nodded, "and I think I have exactly what you need." Her plan was brilliant in its simplicity. Confront them publicly, expose their true intentions before the people they most wanted to impress, the social and business elite of Chicago. There would be no need for courts or police or long legal battles, just the raw truth revealed at the perfect time and place. The ideal occasion presented itself. The 40th anniversary celebration of Orellana Textiles, scheduled to take place at the prestigious Union League Club in exactly 1 month. Everyone would be there. Friends, business partners, influential figures from Chicago society, even specialized press. It would be the perfect stage for my grand finale. In the meantime, I had to keep playing my part as the confused grandmother so as not to arouse suspicion. Every day was an exercise in self-control, having to smile at their condescending comments, pretend not to notice when they rummaged through my things, feign gratitude for their fake concern. One morning, I discovered Jessica going through my private mail. Instead of confronting her, I acted confused. "What are you looking for, dear?" I asked with feigned innocence. "Just organizing your mail, mother-in-law," she replied with that cloying tone she had perfected. "There are some bills that seem overdue. Do you want me to take care of paying them for you?" "How thoughtful," I replied, noticing that the bills in question had been clearly manipulated to alter the due dates. "But don't worry, Maria Elisa takes care of all those payments from the office." A flash of frustration crossed her face before being replaced by her usual smile. They were trying to create exactly the kind of evidence they had discussed. Unpaid bills, financial disorganization, signs of inability to handle everyday matters. Another day, I found Linda talking on the phone in a low voice from my office. When she saw me, she abruptly ended the call. "Who were you talking to?" I asked casually. "Oh, just a friend," she replied too quickly to be believable. "I was telling her how worried we are about you. You've been so distracted lately." "It's my age," I replied, playing along. "Sometimes I feel a little confused." Her face lit up with barely concealed malice. I was giving her exactly what she wanted to hear. Later, checking the list of calls made from my landline, I discovered she had contacted a lawyer specializing in judicial conservatorships. They were speeding up their plans. One evening after dinner, Michael directly addressed the topic they had clearly been discussing among themselves. "Mom, we've noticed that you've been having trouble managing your affairs lately." He began with that falsely concerned tone that turned my stomach. "Maybe it would be good for me to help you with the important decisions, especially the financial ones." "You think so?" I replied, pretending to consider his suggestion. "Maybe you're right. I do feel a bit overwhelmed sometimes." "It's completely normal at your age," Linda intervened. "My sister-in-law went through the same thing. One day she was perfectly fine, the next she couldn't even remember her own name." "How terrible," I murmured, noticing how the three of them exchanged complicit glances. They were building their narrative step by step, creating a history of my supposed decline that they could later present to a court. "Don't worry, Mom." Michael continued placing his hand on mine in a gesture I would have once interpreted as affectionate, but which now seemed calculated. "I'll take care of everything. I just need you to sign some documents that Jessica is preparing." "Documents?" I asked with feigned confusion. "Nothing important," Jessica chimed in quickly. "Just to make it easier for Michael to help you with the accounts, the properties, that sort of thing, so you don't have to worry about anything." "How thoughtful of you," I replied, forcing a smile. "I'll review them tomorrow when I'm more rested." "There's no rush," Michael said, though the tension in his voice contradicted his words. "But the sooner we sign them, the sooner I can start helping you." That night, alone in my room, I reviewed the day's recordings. As I suspected as soon as I went to bed, the three of them celebrated what they considered a significant advance in their plan. "She's caving faster than I thought," Michael commented. "A few more days and we'll have her signature on the power of attorney. After that, it's just a matter of time for the full conservatorship." "Let's not count our chickens before they hatch," Linda warned. "Your mother has always been shrewd. We have to make sure she really signs without reading the details." "Trust me," Michael replied with arrogance. "I know exactly how to handle her." I turned off the recording, feeling a mix of nausea and renewed determination. They were so sure of their victory, so confident in their ability to manipulate me, that they had completely let their guard down. They had no idea that every word, every plan, every conspiracy was being meticulously documented. The next day, I received a call from Emily. She had arrived in Chicago and was staying discreetly at Susan's house, just as we had agreed. "I can't believe what you're telling me, Mom," she said, her voice trembling with indignation after listening to the recordings. "My own brother. How can he be so cruel?" "Greed changes people, darling," I replied sadly. "And Michael always had that seed in him, the tendency to take the easy way out, to expect others to solve his problems. Still planning a judicial conservatorship, talking about putting you in a home against your will. It's monstrous. The important thing now is to stop them before they cause irreparable damage," I said, focusing on solutions rather than pain. "How are the negotiations with Martin going?" "Better than expected," Emily replied, her voice regaining some of its usual energy. "The contract is ready to be signed. He's just waiting for the date we indicated to make the public announcement. Perfect, and the bank transfers. All prepared. As soon as the money from the sale is deposited, it will be immediately transferred to the accounts we established overseas. Michael will never be able to touch it, even if he somehow manages to get the conservatorship." "Excellent work, honey." I praised her, feeling immense pride for this brilliant, honest, and loyal woman I had raised. "Now we just have to wait for the perfect moment, and that moment is approaching." The 40th anniversary party for Orellana Textiles was in exactly 2 weeks. The invitations had been distributed, the guest list included the cream of Chicago society, and the prestigious Union League Club was being specially decorated for the occasion. Michael, Jessica, and Linda were more excited about the event than I was, though for completely different reasons. For them, it was the perfect opportunity to present themselves as the natural heirs to the Orellana Textiles empire, to make contacts with influential figures who could be useful to them once they had control of my assets. They had no idea that the party they were so eagerly anticipating would actually be the stage for their greatest humiliation. Everything was ready for the grand 40th anniversary party of Orellana Textiles at the prestigious Union League Club. With the help of Emily and Dr. Reynolds, I had finalized the negotiations to sell the company to Martin Edwards. The price was exorbitant, well above market value, and the contract had been signed in secret with clauses guaranteeing absolute discretion until the official announcement. On the morning of the celebration, I woke up with a strange feeling in my chest, a mix of anxiety and determination I had never experienced before. I looked out the window of the small guest room, the same one I was relegated to, when Michael and Jessica took my master bedroom, and I saw the sun timidly rising between the buildings. It would be the last sunrise I would witness in that house, the house I built with so much love and was now about to leave forever. I got ready, calmly savoring every moment of that morning. I had my jasmine tea on the terrace, looking at the garden that David, my late husband, had designed decades ago. I allowed myself a moment of nostalgia, remembering how proud he was of his rose bushes, especially the yellow ones he cultivated with such care. He always said that yellow roses symbolized the friendship that existed between us, even before romantic love blossomed. What would he think of all this? I murmured to myself. Knowing David, he would probably be even more outraged by the situation than I was. He was always a just man, strict with his principles, who tolerated no betrayals of any kind. My thoughts were interrupted by Linda, who appeared on the terrace in that excessively expensive robe bought, of course, with my credit card. "You're up early, Sarah," she commented with false cordiality. "Nervous about the party?" "Not at all," I replied serenely, taking a sip of my tea. "I'm just enjoying the morning." She looked at me with a mixture of distrust and disdain. During those months of forced cohabitation, I had learned to decipher her every look, every tone of voice. Linda had never worked a single day in her life. She lived off her ex-husband's pension, and now apparently off the resources of her daughter and son-in-law, or rather, my resources. "Jessica and I are thinking of going to the salon later before the party," she commented, pouring herself some coffee. "You should come with us, get the full treatment." Translation: they would spend a few $1,000 more on my card for extravagant beauty treatments. "Thanks for the invitation, but I already have an appointment with my regular hairstylist," I replied. In reality, I had a much more important engagement, a final meeting with Dr. Reynolds to confirm every detail of my plan. "As you wish," she shrugged, clearly relieved not to have to include me in her plans. "Just don't be late for the party." "It's going to be a big day for the company." "It will certainly be an unforgettable day," I agreed with a smile she couldn't interpret. As soon as I finished my breakfast, I called a cab. I avoided using my own car so as not to arouse suspicion about my destinations. I asked to be dropped off at the Magnificent Mile where I was supposedly going to do some shopping. As soon as the cab drove away, I called another one and headed to Dr. Reynolds' office. Emily was already waiting for me there along with Susan. Seeing them there united in my support brought tears to my eyes. During those months of daily humiliation, my daughter and my best friend were my pillars of sanity. "Mom, everything is ready." Emily hugged me as soon as I walked in. The bank transfer documents were finalized last night. 80% of the sale value is already secure in the overseas accounts. And the apartment at the Valley View condominium is fully furnished and ready for you to move in. Susan completed. "I took your jewelry and important documents there yesterday, as you asked." Dr. Reynolds, always impeccable in her tailored suits, pointed to a folder on her desk. "The donation of the house to the New Dawn Foundation is ready to be announced," she explained. "I've already spoken with the foundation's director. They are prepared for an immediate move-in as soon as the announcement is made. And here," she indicated another folder, "is the documentation for the sale of the company. All perfectly legal and indisputable." I nodded, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. I was giving up so much. The house where I raised my children, the company I built from scratch. But there was no alternative, not after discovering the true nature of those who should have loved and protected me. "And what about the recordings?" I asked, referring to the conversations I had secretly recorded in recent months. "Edited and ready to be shown," Emily replied. "We selected the most revealing excerpts, especially those where they talk about your supposed incapacity and the conservatorship plans." "And the full medical report is also here," Dr. Reynolds added, showing another folder. 3 different doctors all certifying your full mental and physical capacity. No judge in the country would accept a conservatorship request with these reports." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision I had made. There was no turning back now. "Are you sure you want to do this, Mom?" Emily asked, sensing my momentary hesitation. "We can still confront them privately, demand they leave the house." "No, dear," I replied firmly. "They didn't just deal me a financial blow. They tried to destroy my dignity, my self-confidence. They made me question my own sanity. The humiliation was public little by little, day after day, in front of friends, employees, acquaintances. The response will also be public." Susan squeezed my hand in support. "You were always strong, Sarah. Ever since college, when you stood up to your father to open the first textile store while the rest of us were only worried about finding a good husband." I smiled at the memory. Indeed, I was never one to follow conventions. When I opened the first Orellana textile store in the early 80s, few women managed their own businesses. My father, a traditional man, thought it was absurd that his daughter wanted to venture into the business world. "A woman's place is taking care of the house and children," he would say. but I persisted, defying all expectations. I met David shortly after on one of my business trips. He was an engineer working on an infrastructure project. Unlike my father and many men of that era, David admired my independence and ambition. We married 6 months later and built not only a family, but an empire together. His premature death from a massive heart attack 15 years ago was the hardest blow I had faced until now. "David would be proud of you," Susan said, as if reading my thoughts. "He always said you were the bravest woman he knew." I wiped away a stubborn tear that escaped. "Let's finalize the details for tonight," I said, returning to the main issue. "I don't want any flaws, any loophole they can exploit later." We spent the next hour reviewing every aspect of the plan. The order of events, who would be positioned where, how the recordings would be displayed. Everything meticulously calculated like a military operation. Oh, and one last thing, I remembered as we were preparing to conclude the meeting. I invited William Preston to the party. Susan raised her eyebrows in surprise. "The real estate entrepreneur, the one you met at the Chamber of Commerce event." "Exactly." I confirmed, feeling a slight blush on my cheeks. "He's been a good friend lately." "A good friend or something more?" Susan teased with a mischievous smile that made me laugh for the first time in days. "Just a friend for now," I replied, feeling strangely cheerful despite the circumstances. But who knows what the future holds? I left Dr. Reynolds' office with a lighter heart, despite the tension of what was to come. I went to the beauty salon where I did have a real appointment. After all, if I was going to deliver the final blow to those who tried to destroy me, I would do it looking like a queen. At the salon, while the stylist arranged my hair in an elegant updo, I allowed myself to remember the exact moment everything changed, the straw that finally broke the camel's back. I returned home in the afternoon with an elegant hairstyle that enhanced my features and discreet makeup that highlighted my eyes. I felt ready for the battle ahead. I found the house in a state of commotion. Jessica was running back and forth trying on different pairs of earrings in front of the living room mirror. Linda was talking loudly on the phone, apparently giving instructions to someone about the party arrangements, and Michael, my son, was sitting on the sofa distractedly fiddling with his cell phone as if all the commotion had nothing to do with him. "You're finally here," Jessica exclaimed when she saw me. "We were worried you'd be late for your own party." The fake concern in her voice was almost comical. In the last 3 months, she hadn't worried once about my well-being, only about access to my credit card and the keys to my imported car. "I was just sorting out some last-minute details," I replied calmly, heading for the stairs. "I'm going to get ready now." "Don't take too long," Linda warned, covering the phone with her hand. "The driver will be here in an hour to take us to the club." I nodded and went up the stairs with deliberate calm. Each step I took brought me closer to the moment I had been waiting for, the moment of truth, of justice, if one can call what I planned to do that. In my room, or rather in the guest room I now occupied, I opened the closet and looked at the dress I had set aside for the occasion. It wasn't the navy blue one that Michael had kindly suggested, but an elegant deep red dress the color of wine. A deliberate choice. In Eastern culture, which I frequently dealt with in my imported textile business, red symbolizes power, good luck, and most importantly, celebration. And I certainly had a lot to celebrate that night. An hour later, we were all in the limousine on our way to the Union League Club. I watched the 3 of them chatting excitedly about the party. They were visibly thrilled not by the celebration of the company's 40 years, but by the opportunity to present themselves as the natural heirs of the Orellana Textiles empire. "Remember to speak briefly," Linda instructed Michael. "Thank everyone for the opportunity to continue your mother's legacy, but don't go into details about future plans just yet." "And if someone asks about the succession in the company," Jessica questioned, "say we are in a period of natural transition," Linda replied, with that smug tone I had learned to detest. "That Sarah is still officially in charge, but that you are already taking on a large part of the administrative responsibilities." A blatant lie, of course. Michael had never shown the slightest interest in the family business. On the rare occasions he showed up at the store, it was only to take money or use the meeting room for personal appointments. We arrived at the Union League Club promptly at 8 in the evening. The ballroom was magnificently decorated, an elegant combination of exotic flowers and soft lighting. Rare textiles from the exclusive Orellana Textiles collection served as strategically placed decorative pieces, creating intimate settings within the large space. At the entrance, we were greeted by a line of employees, many of whom had worked with me for decades. I noticed the confused looks when Michael, Jessica, and Linda walked past me, behaving like the main hosts of the party. "Mrs. Orellana," whispered Maria Elisa, my personal assistant for over 15 years, when she managed to approach me discreetly. "Everything is as agreed. The files are with the audio-visual technician. The presentation is ready to be shown when you give the signal." I thanked her with a discreet nod and headed to the main hall, where nearly 200 guests were already gathered. The cream of Chicago society, influential entrepreneurs, journalists, specializing in economics and business, politicians, diplomats, all people who had in some way been part of the Orellana Textiles journey over the past 4 decades. I observed with interest the dynamic that naturally established itself. Michael, Jessica, and Linda circulated through the room as if they were the true hosts, introducing themselves as the future of the company. I saw Jessica explaining to a group of ladies how she planned to modernize the brand, while Linda whispered with some businessmen about investment opportunities that would soon arise. "They don't waste time, do they?" a familiar voice commented beside me. It was William, elegant in his dark suit, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "They have always been very efficient when it comes to seizing opportunities," I replied, accepting the glass he offered, "especially when those opportunities involve money that isn't theirs." William smiled, that discreet smile that had become a balm for me in recent times. Unlike so many men my age, he never treated me like a rich old woman or as a target to be conquered out of interest. Our connection was genuine, based on mutual respect and admiration. "Are you ready for what's next?" he asked, his voice betraying a slight concern. "More than ever," I replied firmly. "It's time to rebalance the scales." At that moment, I noticed Emily entering the room discreetly. As we had agreed, she had arrived separately and did not approach me immediately. Beside her were Dr. Reynolds, both elegantly dressed and with determined expressions. Susan was already positioned near the stage, chatting casually with the master of ceremonies. "It seems everyone is in their places," William observed. "Then it's time for the show to begin," I replied, taking a deep breath. I made my way to the center of the room, where a small stage had been set up. The master of ceremonies announced that it was time for the speech from the founder and president of Orellana Textiles. I noticed the look of slight panic on Michael's face, who clearly did not expect me to take the initiative with the speech. I walked up to the stage with an upright posture and the confidence of someone who built an empire from scratch. I looked at the assembled audience friends, business partners, loyal customers, and then at the 3 faces that had turned my life into a hell in recent months. Michael, Jessica, and Linda were now strategically positioned near the stage, fake smiles on their faces ready to take over as soon as I finished what they imagined would be a brief and confused speech from a supposedly cognitively declining old woman. "Good evening, everyone." I began, my voice clear and firm, resonating through the microphone. "It is with immense joy that I celebrate today not only the 40 years of Orellana Textiles, but also the beginning of a new phase in my life." The murmurs in the audience ceased. All eyes were fixed on me. The moment I had waited for so long had finally arrived. Today, I close an important chapter of my journey and begin another even more exciting one. And you, my dear friends and partners, will be the first witnesses to this transformation. I saw the confusion in Michael's eyes, Jessica's growing nervousness, Linda's sudden pallor. None of them knew what was coming, but somehow, instinctively, they sensed that their plans were about to fall apart. With a serene smile, I gave a discreet signal to the audio-visual technician. The large screen behind me lit up, and the presentation I had so meticulously prepared began to play. It was time for the truth. And what truth would be revealed that night? The large screen behind me lit up with the Orellana Textiles logo, the same symbol I created 4 decades ago when all I had was a small rented space and a lot of determination. Silence fell over the room as all eyes turned to the presentation. As many of you know, I continued, my voice echoing through the hall. I built Orellana Textiles from the ground up, navigating a male-dominated market at a time when female entrepreneurs were a rarity. I faced prejudice, closed doors, and many said I would fail. I paused, looking directly at Michael, who seemed increasingly agitated. But life has taught me that the most difficult obstacles don't always come from strangers. Sometimes they come from those we trust the most. The image on the screen changed now, showing a contract with the logo of United Artisanal Textiles. I heard gasps in the audience, especially from some business partners, who immediately recognized the name of the Ecuadorian conglomerate. I am pleased to announce that Orellana Textiles has just been acquired by United Artisanal Textiles in a negotiation that I consider not only financially satisfactory, but strategically brilliant for the future of the brand. The murmurs exploded throughout the hall. I saw Michael turn pale, his face contorting into an expression of shock and disbelief. He took 2 steps toward the stage, but was subtly restrained by one of the security guards I had strategically positioned. The transaction was completed yesterday, I continued, maintaining my composure. As of today, Orellana Textiles begins a new phase under international leadership, with plans for expansion into markets we never imagined reaching. The look on Jessica's face was priceless, a mixture of shock, anger, and most satisfyingly for me, fear. Her dream of taking control of the company had just evaporated before her eyes. Linda, for her part, had assumed a rigid posture, her lips pressed into a thin line, desperately trying to maintain appearances as her house of cards collapsed. "But don't worry," I added with a serene smile. "I'm not retiring. I will continue as a special consultant for a transitional period, sharing my knowledge and experience with the new team. After all, at 67, I still have a lot to contribute, don't I?" That last sentence was directed specifically at the 3 of them, a direct reference to their insinuations about my supposed incapacity. I saw some people in the audience exchange confused glances, not understanding the full implication of my words. "Now," I continued, signaling for the technician to change the presentation again, "I would like to share with you another important decision I made recently." The screen now displayed a photo of my mansion in Lincoln Park, followed by the logo of the New Dawn Foundation. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the director Alicia, whom I had specially invited for the occasion, smile excitedly. My house, that same mansion in Lincoln Park, where many of you have been welcomed for dinners and celebrations, will be donated in its entirety to the New Dawn Foundation, which does extraordinary work sheltering vulnerable seniors. The applause was immediate and warm. Philanthropy was always well regarded among the Chicago elite, even if it was often just for a photo op. In my case, however, the decision came from the heart, and with a touch of poetic justice that no one beyond my confidants could fully understand. "The official transfer will take place in 48 hours, I explained, observing the growing panic on the faces of Michael, Jessica, and Linda, which is enough time for the current guests of the house to collect their personal belongings. The emphasis on the word guests did not go unnoticed. I saw some eyebrows raise among the closest guests, those who knew that my son and his family had moved into my house. Confusion began to spread exactly as I had planned. But before we continue with tonight's celebrations, my voice took on a more serious tone. I feel I owe you, my friends and partners of so many years, an explanation for these seemingly sudden decisions. I gave a signal, and the screen behind me changed again. This time, it displayed a recording of one of the many conversations I had secretly captured in my house. Jessica and Linda discussing how I was senile and incapable of managing my own business. Michael planning how they could gather evidence for a judicial conservatorship process. The silence in the hall was absolute, broken only by gasps of surprise and indignation. Never had so many jaws dropped at a single social event in Chicago. "Can we create that proof?" Michael's voice boomed through the sound system. "Intercept mail, alter payment dates, that sort of thing." "And what will we do with her once we get the conservatorship?" Jessica asked in the recording. There are excellent facilities, my son replied with a coldness that made several guests turn to look at him with horrified expressions. Discreet places with good medical infrastructure. She'll be fine there. I cut off the recording with a gesture. There was no need to show more. The damage was done. Michael seemed to have shrunk several inches. Jessica was covering her face with her hands, and Linda was frantically looking toward the exits like a cornered animal. As you can see, I resumed, my voice surprisingly calm. I was forced to take drastic measures to protect not only my assets but my own freedom and dignity. Dr. Reynolds walked onto the stage at that moment carrying an elegant leather folder. This is Dr. Olivia Reynolds, my lawyer. I introduced her. She has some documents to deliver to certain individuals present. With almost choreographed precision, Dr. Reynolds descended from the stage and walked directly to where Michael, Jessica, and Linda were frozen. She handed each of them an official envelope, saying loud enough for those nearby to hear, "Notice of eviction with a 48-hour deadline as announced," and then handing another set of documents to Michael. This is a preemptive court order against any attempt at conservatorship based on complete medical reports certifying the full mental and physical capacity of Mrs. Sarah Orellana conducted in recent weeks by 3 independent specialists. My son's face was a mask of fury and humiliation. For a moment I thought he would explode, make a scene, maybe even try to disrupt the event. But the weight of the disapproving stares around him seemed to create an unbearable pressure. Without a word, he grabbed Jessica's arm and gestured for Linda, heading quickly toward the nearest exit. "Oh, I almost forgot," I called out, making them stop in their tracks. "All credit cards linked to my accounts were canceled exactly?" I glanced at my wristwatch. 20 minutes ago. I suggest you make cash withdrawals if you need immediate funds." It was the final blow. I saw Jessica's shoulders slump in absolute defeat. The 3 of them hurried out of the ballroom, followed by curious glances, whispers, and in some cases, poorly concealed laughter. I took a deep breath, feeling an immense weight lifted from my shoulders. The hardest part was over. The confrontation I had feared and planned for weeks was concluded. Now it was time to look forward. "My dear friends," I resumed, my voice now lighter, "I apologize for the dramatic interlude. This is not how I planned to celebrate 40 years of Orellana Textiles, but sometimes life forces us to face painful truths in order to move on." Emily came up to the stage and took my hand, offering her silent support. Susan joined us shortly after, bringing with her Director Alicia from the New Dawn Foundation. "I would like to introduce you to Director Alicia Mendive," I said, "the extraordinary woman who will transform my former house into a cozy home for dozens of seniors who truly need care and dignity." The applause was generous. Alicia, a woman in her early 70s with more energy than many young people, took the microphone briefly. "On behalf of all the seniors who will benefit from this extraordinary donation, I want to express our eternal gratitude to Mrs. Orellana. Sarah, this mansion will not just be a roof over their heads, but a symbol of hope and dignity for people society often forgets." More applause. I saw tears in some people's eyes. The atmosphere in the room had completely changed, from tension and shock to a genuine celebration of generosity and resilience. "And now," I announced, "I invite you all to enjoy this wonderful evening. The band will start playing in a few minutes, dinner will be served, and we will celebrate not only 4 decades of a successful company, but also new beginnings." And that, my dear friends, is how I taught an unforgettable lesson to those who tried to take everything from me. Life comes full circle, doesn't it? Today at 67, I am living a new chapter I never imagined. My apartment overlooking the park brings me peace every morning. My new foundation to support female entrepreneurs over 50 gives me a renewed purpose. And William, that wonderful man who came into my life at just the right moment, showed me that it's never too late to start over, even in love. That night at the Union League Club changed everything. Seeing the look on Michael's face when I announced the sale of the company, Linda's pallor when she learned they would have nowhere to live in 48 hours, Jessica's panic when I canceled all the credit cards. It was as if an immense weight was lifted from my shoulders. It wasn't about petty revenge, but about justice, about reclaiming my dignity, about proving to myself that I was still in control of my life. As for my old mansion, it now houses dozens of seniors who receive the care and respect they deserve. I visit occasionally, and there is something profoundly comforting in seeing that space once contaminated by greed now filled with genuine smiles and gratitude. Where there were once conspiracies and plans to declare me incompetent, there are now art workshops, gardening sessions, and seniors reclaiming their sense of purpose and community. The most surprising thing was what happened to Michael, Jessica, and Linda after that night. At first, they tried to fight back. Michael hired a lawyer to contest the sale of the company, but the documents were impeccable. Jessica tried to claim rights to the house as a daughter-in-law, something so absurd that even her lawyer advised her against proceeding. Linda, ever pragmatic in her own way, was the first to give up and move back in with her ex-husband. Over time, reality caught up with them. Without access to my money, without a guaranteed roof over their heads, without the social status that being the heirs of Orellana Textiles provided, they had to do the unthinkable work honestly for the first time in their lives. Michael found a job as a salesman in an electronics store. Jessica, who always bragged about her fashion sense, now works in a boutique where she used to be a customer. Life has a peculiar sense of humor, don't you think? 6 months after that night, I received a letter from Michael. He wasn't asking for money as I expected, but for forgiveness. He confessed that greed had blinded him, that he had let himself be influenced by Jessica and Linda. He told me that now, working hard every day to earn a living, he had begun to understand the value of effort, the satisfaction of building something with his own hands. I didn't answer immediately. The wounds were still too fresh, but over time, and thanks to Emily's persistence, I agreed to a meeting. It was awkward at first, but little by little we are rebuilding something resembling a relationship. It's not the same as before, it never will be, but there is room for forgiveness when there is true remorse. Jessica and I, on the other hand, have not spoken again. I learned that she moved back in with her parents after separating from Michael. Linda, in an unexpected turn of events, has become a volunteer at a senior center. Perhaps seeing the work of the New Dawn Foundation in my old house made her reflect on her own future. What surprises me every day is how life can take a complete turn when you least expect it. At 67, when many are thinking of retiring, of stepping aside, I am living one of the fullest and most exciting stages of my existence. My foundation for older female entrepreneurs is growing exponentially. I receive applications from all over women who, like me, refuse to be made invisible by age, who have dreams, projects, vision. William and I got married 3 months ago in an intimate ceremony with only our closest friends. He, at 70, shares my view that life doesn't end when gray hairs or wrinkles appear. Together we are traveling, exploring, learning new things every day. Last week, we started tango lessons. You can imagine the laughter as we try to coordinate those complicated steps. The most valuable lesson I learned from this whole process is that we must never let anyone make us feel small, incapable, or disposable because of our age. The years we carry are not a burden. They are a collection of experiences, lessons, and wisdom that no arrogant young person can buy or fake. That's why it's so important to share our stories so that others know they are not alone, that there is strength in us, that we can turn things around no matter our age. My story is just one among thousands. Every wrinkle on our faces tells of a battle fought, a lesson learned, a moment of joy or pain that has shaped us. What did you think of my story? Have you been through something similar, or do you know someone who has faced family betrayal? Tell me in the comments. I love reading them all and feeling like we are talking personally. It makes me feel that I'm not alone in this fight for the dignity and respect we all deserve, regardless of our age. Making this video wasn't easy. Reliving these painful moments took a lot of effort. Organizing my thoughts. Finding the precise words to describe something so personal and painful was a process that took time and energy. That's why I ask you, if my story moved you, if it touched a chord in your heart, please leave a like on this video. That small gesture means a lot to me and to the Elderly Stories channel. And if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, do it right now. We have many other exciting stories to share. Real stories of people who, like me, faced seemingly impossible challenges and came out victorious. Stories that will make you laugh, cry, reflect, and above all, remember that we are never too old to start over. I also wanted to ask if you can for your help through the Thanks button, a way to contribute financially so that the channel can continue to bring stories like mine daily. The costs to maintain a quality channel are high. Equipment, editing, research. And your contribution, however small, makes all the difference for us to continue this work. This would greatly help in bringing more videos like this with stories that need to be told and heard. I've always believed that sharing our experiences is a form of healing not only for the one who tells the story, but also for the one who listens. If my story helped at least one person find the strength to face a difficult situation, then this whole process was worth it. Always remember, age is just a number. What defines who we are is our inner strength, our ability to adapt, our courage to face life's storms, even when those storms have the name and face of people we love. As I said at the beginning, my son brought his wife and his mother-in-law to live with me and even told me, if you don't like it, find another house. His wife laughed, but I was the one who got the last laugh when I did this to them. Thank you for listening. I hope to see you in the comments and in the next videos from the Elderly Stories channel. Until the next story.